In today's video, we're making ornaments from glazed bricks. 12 ornaments to be exact. Each one is distinctly different with its own shape and personality. I'll show you how I was able to cut down the material and then design a cohesive collection. And it's something you can do too. Let's get to it. Welcome back, and if you're new here, my name is Julie. And on this channel, we talk about tips, tricks, tools, adhesives, materials, and specific mosaic projects, all to shorten your learning curve when it comes to creating mosaic art. So if that sounds like something you'd be interested in, please consider subscribing. This ornament collection is a commission by a client who wanted to remember a home that was in her husband's family for many generations. It was affectionately called the River House, and multiple generations would gather every year there to vacation, spend time together. In fact, my client's daughter took her first steps at this house. The house was sold, and my client wanted to give a little memento or souvenir to each of the family members to remember this beloved house. So she sent me a box of some extra glazed brick, and this brick covered the entire first floor of the River House. My client had just one restriction or requirement for each of the ornaments, and I made 12 of them. And that was each ornament needed to contain pieces of the glazed brick. As far as design or bringing in other materials, that was completely up to me. But I needed to include the brick in each of the ornaments. Talk about a dream client. Let's just take a moment and look at these bricks. Isn't that glaze gorgeous? It's light blue with an olive green background. One of my favorite color combos, but it doesn't necessarily scream Christmas to me. So I had some work to do in turning that around. I couldn't work with the bricks as is since they were too thick and hard to cut with mosaic hand cutting tools. So I thinned them out, or cut them down, so to speak, with my wet saw. I did a video here on the channel all about how I cut down the bricks on my wet saw, and I'll include a link down below in the description so you can check it out. The style of mosaic that we'll do in today's video is called Pique Assiette, and Pique Assiette means thief of plates in French. Sometimes you may hear this type of mosaic referred to as memoryware, shardware, or bits and pieces. And it's a collection of plates, bowls, mugs, tiles, found objects. And yes, you guessed it, I've done a number of videos here on the channel all about Pique Assiette mosaic, and I'll include links down below in the description so you can check them out. We've got a lot to cover, so let's get started. I knew I was in for quite a creative ride when I received the box from my client, and there were heavy stickers all over the outside. And to note, amazingly, not a single brick was broken. So, as I mentioned a little earlier, I cut down the bricks to a more manageable thickness and got started practicing cutting the tesserae to see what I could do with it. I used compound tile nippers to get this done. I needed to see how easy or hard it would be to cut the bricks, and also how small of pieces would I be able to get. Next, I got started with picking out some wood substrates. I wanted all 12 to be different shapes, although I did end up with a large stocking and a small stocking. I wanted them to be traditional Christmas motifs and non-traditional. Once I picked out the 12 substrates, I drilled holes in each of them for the ribbon hangers. And I did this on my drill press. Next, I got started with sealing the fronts and backs of the ornaments. I've done a video here on the channel all about how to seal wood for mosaic, and I'll include a link down below in the description so you can check it out. When sealing pieces, I like to work on wax paper. Once the pieces are dry, the substrates peel right off. And then I painted the fronts and the backs of the ornaments. I chose a dark gray paint, which is also the color of the grout I'll use. I like to do all of this work ahead of time to avoid accidentally painting the grout later. If I happen to get any grout or grout dust on the backs of the ornaments, I can easily wipe it off with a damp cloth. I'll quickly go over each of the ornaments and their design so you can get a closer look, and I'll also discuss any challenges you may want to look out for in case you do any ornaments like this, and then we'll move on to grouting and finishing off. The glazed bricks require a heavy-duty adhesive, so for each of the ornaments I used thin-set mortar. I worked with small batches of it. You'll see, however, later in the video that I did use another adhesive for a few items. And speaking of a few items, there are a couple ornaments which require a few additional embellishments or adornments, and those will go on after the ornaments have been grouted. And it turned out that those are my two favorite ornaments from the collection, so you'll want to stick around and see what happens. All right, let's get tiling. For the first ornament, I wanted to ease into this project and work on a design idea that's been on my mind. So I selected a few shades of red stained glass and cut some short matchsticks. The only Christmas theme of this ornament is the fact that I'm using red stained glass and there's an olive green in the glazed brick. Hey, not everyone wants super Christmassy traditional type ornaments. So I wanted to create a piece that went along with the idea of festive but not expected. You know what I mean? Next, I cut large-ish pieces of glazed brick and laid them out on my ornament substrate. I concentrated on placing them vertically on the outsides of the substrate, keeping them away from the center. Once I was happy with the design, I glued them down. Then I spread thin-set mortar in the center and started tiling using the red stained glass matchsticks. I adhered them upright on one end. I made sure to tile around the hole that I previously drilled at the top for the hanger and filled in every little nook and cranny along the way with the stained glass matchsticks, and I continued all the way down to the bottom of the ornament. For the second ornament, I made a Christmas tree. I don't know why, but I love a Christmas tree ornament on a Christmas tree. So I started by gluing down some glass gems onto the 4 raised areas for the ornaments. Next, I used my wheeled glass nippers to cut some yellow glitter glass tiles to create a star at the top of the tree, and then I glued down those pieces as well. For the body or branches of the tree, I cut slivers of the glazed brick. These are small, elongated triangles. I wasn't exact about my cuts so that it didn't look so planned out or perfect. I started gluing them down to the substrate in a random pattern and direction, much like what you would find in nature. I placed some of the triangles point side up and some of them point side down. I found that this random pattern added a lot of interest to the ornament. And then I finished off the bottom of the tree, you know, the tree trunk, with a couple pieces of brown stained glass. For the third ornament, I selected a substrate which looks a lot like a circle or round ornament. I started by cutting largish pieces of glazed brick and placed them randomly on the substrate. Once I was happy with the design, I glued them down. Then I moved on to adding in the background of white ceramic tile with smaller pieces of metallic gold tile and a red ceramic plate. I finished off the top of the ornament with gold ceramic tile. For the fourth ornament, I made a stocking, and this is the small stocking. I started by measuring out and drawing a line along the top of the substrate. This was my guide for the tile work on the cuff. Next, I cut pieces of glazed brick and tiled the cuff as well as the heel, and then worked on the toe. Next, I cut pieces of a brown and white patterned dinner plate and started placing the tessera. Once I was happy with the design, I started gluing everything down. The final detail was filling in the background with pieces of a golden yellow mug. Moving on, the fifth ornament is the Christmas bell. I started off by measuring and cutting a large piece of glazed brick for the main body of the bell. I also measured out and cut a thinner piece of glazed brick for the bottom of the bell. I wanted the ringer in the bell to be a peachy, orangey, flat-backed glass gem, which I would cut in half with my wheeled glass nippers. I measured and cut a few pieces of a vintage off-white crackle-painted dinner plate to fill in the gap. I also cut smaller pieces of that plate to go around the whole opening at the top of the ornament. Once I was happy with the pieces and design, I glued everything down to the substrate. The purple permanent marker will come off in grouting, or I can remove it with some rubbing alcohol on a cotton swab. For the sixth ornament, I used this cactus-shaped substrate. I knew exactly what I wanted to do with this ornament. So I got started by tracing different parts of the cactus onto the glazed brick. And I cut the various pieces out. I know it looks rather plain at the moment, but don't worry, there's more to come with this mosaic design later in the video. But for now, these brick pieces are glued down and waiting patiently for more mosaic details to be added. For the seventh ornament, I picked a pineapple substrate, which seems fitting as the client and her family and the family's river house are all in Florida. So very tropical. I started by drawing the crown of the pineapple on the substrate, and then I cut pieces of glazed brick for each of the crown pieces. Then things got a little tricky. I knew what I wanted to do with the body of the pineapple, I just needed to come up with a pattern for the pieces. So I started at the bottom of the pineapple by cutting an oval of stained glass. And then I started cutting more pieces of glass to stack on top of that. I marked up glass and continued to grind the pieces in order to fit them in the spaces. This took a lot of back and forth with cutting and grinding. Because the stained glass was multiple shades of transparent amber, I was able to hold up many of the pieces of glass to the empty spaces on the substrate and use a permanent marker to draw an initial outline of the needed shape onto the glass. I then took that glass and cut it down with a glass cutter and eventually used the grinder to make the final adjustments. Once all of the pieces of stained glass were cut and fit nicely on the substrate, I glued everything down. Who's been counting? We're up to our 8th ornament. And speaking of the 8th ornament, I selected a winter mitten substrate. I started by gluing a wood star to the center of the substrate. This will be a raised detail. Then I continued with measuring and cutting orange stained glass for the thumb and the cuff. I cut a light blue circle of vitreous glass for the center of the wood star and continued adding white stained glass triangles around it. But I'm not gluing down the pieces just yet. Next, I moved on to measuring and cutting pieces of glazed brick for the background or hand portion of the mitten. To finish off the cuff, I cut rectangles of light blue vitreous glass. It's the same blue from the center of the star, and I put them into position. Once I was happy with the design of the piece, I glued everything down. The 9th ornament is a heart. I started by gluing a smaller wood heart onto the heart substrate. Then I measured and cut a few curved pieces of purple stained glass. I wanted to create sections where I could add pieces of millefiori and glass rods. So I placed a few pieces on the substrate to see if my idea was going to work or if the purple stained glass pieces needed to be adjusted in size. Okay, we're good, so I moved on to cutting somewhat random shaped pieces of the glazed brick to create a frame around the edge of the heart. Once the edge was glued down, I painted the raised heart with white paint. I did this because some of the millefiori are clear, so the white paint behind them will make them look even brighter. I let that sit and dry before I proceeded. Once the paint dried, I glued the 2 pieces of purple stained glass to the substrate, and then I got started cutting pieces of glass rods to incorporate with the millefiori, and I tiled both the rod pieces and millefiori in a random pattern. The 10th ornament is a bow. Bows are so sweet, especially when they have bright colors on them. So I picked out my glass tile and got started cutting circles from each piece. I did grind the edges to clean them up a bit. Next, I placed the circles in a random pattern, spacing them out evenly. And then I cut small pieces of glazed brick to fill in the background and glued them down. The 11th ornament is a shape that reminds me of retro ornaments. It's not quite the shape of a light bulb or teardrop, but it's reminiscent of a vintage classic ornament. What would you call this shape? So I started by using my rotary tile cutter to cut down pieces of a dinner plate. And I got to work with laying out the tesserae, measuring, and cutting. Next, I started working with color and material ideas to separate the sections of glazed brick and plate. I glued down the center piece of glazed brick and then turned smaller squares of glass tiles on their sides for a little added interest and texture. For the top and bottom of the ornament, I used a textured wine-colored porcelain tile. The 12th and final ornament is a large stocking. I started by measuring and cutting the glazed brick for the heel and toe, and then moved on to the cuff. Next, I turned small squares of glass tiles on their sides to outline the heel, toe, and cuff of the stocking. Then I cut 3 pieces of a vintage off-white crackle-painted dinner plate and glued them down to complete the ornament. So once I was done tiling all of the ornaments, I let them sit and dry for at least 24 hours before I moved on to the next step. The ornaments have been sitting here drying for a few days, and now they're ready to be grouted. I'm using the same color grout for all of the ornaments, which is dark gray. I've done a video here on the channel about how to mix up grout for Mosaic, and I'll include a link down below in the description so you can check it out. I've mixed up all my grout and I'm ready to get started. All of the ornaments will be fully grouted, which means the entire front will be grouted except for this first one right here. This one, I'm going to try to be very careful not to get grout in the center area where the red stained glass matchsticks are. Now, I could have taped off the area with painter's tape, but I did tile the matchsticks at different levels, and I wasn't confident the tape would do much good. So I'm going to take it really slow on this first one just to make sure I keep the grout out of the area. The other 11 ornaments are very straightforward and can be grouted as usual. So I'm grouting in a clockwise, counterclockwise motion, making sure I get the grout into all of the grout line areas. Remember that the brick is glazed, so this side of the brick won't soak up the moisture from the grout. It'll act just as stained glass or glass tile would by repelling the grout or not allowing it to soak in or hang on. Once everything is grouted, I'll go back and clean off each of the ornaments. Now, normally I would let a mosaic sit for about 10 to 20 minutes before cleaning off, but because I grouted so many at one time, it's been at least 20 minutes since I started the first one, so now I can go back and start cleaning off the first one and so forth. I like to use dry paper towels to clean off grout, especially when it's a wood substrate. I'll take the grout off the same way I put it on in a clockwise, counterclockwise motion. I'll be careful not to be too rough or vigorous, but still with enough force to get the substrate surfaces cleaned off. I want to make sure I get all of the grout off that's on top of the glass, ceramic, and glazed brick. I can always use something soft like a toothpick if I need to dig out any grout from recessed or hard to reach areas. Okay, everything's cleaned off and looks great. Once the ornaments have been cleaned off and the grout has cured, I like to finish off the backs by signing my name and painting them with a good quality sealer. Now, after all of those layers are dry, the ornaments are ready for hangers. I've selected black velvet ribbon for these ornaments. I prefer to use velvet whenever possible because I think it works really well with mosaic ornaments, not only with how sturdy and weighty it is, but I like the contrast of how soft the velvet is compared to the hard materials of traditional mosaic. Another reason I'm using the same ribbon for all of these pieces is because these are a collection. And although the client commissioned these pieces to give away, should she want to keep a few for herself or give more than one to a family member, it'll look like a cohesive collection for whoever owns them, no matter how many they have. There are lots of other ways to create a cohesive collection, even if the shape and theme of the ornaments are different. You can use the same material from one ornament to the next, like I did with the glazed brick. You can still mix in other materials as well. But keeping the consistency alive with a common thread of the same material helps convey cohesion. You can use the same shape substrate, but mix up the colors and design to create a cohesive ornament collection. Also, using the same grout color is another great way to create the feel of a collection, even if they all have different shapes. Another idea is to tile your ornaments in the same aesthetic or by using the same size tesserae pieces. This can convey cohesion. And like in today's video, using the same ribbon from one ornament to the next creates a feeling of belonging to or part of a collection. I also used the same color grout for all of the ornaments and painted the backs the same color as well. Now, as I mentioned, there are a couple ornaments in this video that do require some additional embellishments or adornments. And the first one is this cactus ornament right here. I'm going to make this a Christmas cactus. How appropriate, right? So I've got a few small pieces of mosaic mesh and I'll cut very small circles of bright yellow stained glass and long slivers of red stained glass. I'll use Weld Bond to glue the pieces onto the mesh to create a flower. And again, I'm working on top of wax paper because it will pull off easily once everything is dry. I've done a video here on how to use mosaic mesh, and I'll include a link down below in the description so you can check it out. The second ornament I need to create embellishments or adornments for is the Christmas bell. I want to include some holly leaves and berries. So I cut 3 rectangles of green stained glass and drew the outline of holly leaves in permanent marker. Then I cut 3 red circles for the berries out of glass tile. I then cut out the notches using my wheeled glass nippers. I also glued these glass pieces onto a small piece of mosaic mesh. Once the glue is dry, I'll very carefully remove the meshed pieces from the wax paper and trim off the excess mesh and dried glue. And I'll also remove the permanent marker with rubbing alcohol on a cotton swab. I'll glue on all of these embellishments to the ornaments once the ribbon hangers have been added. There you have it, a cohesive collection of Christmas ornaments using a beloved sentimental material that works really well on any substrate in a variety of themes, both traditional and non-traditional, and pairs beautifully with bright, bold colors. Happy holidays. Question of the day, let me know down in the comments if you've ever made mosaic Christmas ornaments. I'd love to hear. Thank you so much for watching. Please give this video a thumbs up as it really does help my channel, and subscribe if you haven't already. Click the bell notification so you never miss a single upload, and let me know in the comments if there's something you'd like me to cover in a future video. I'll see you soon. Bye. Are we looking good out there? Hello? That's kind of echoey. Nope. Nope, 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 nope. I had it, and then it just poop. I thought I would dress in my Christmas plaid, my tartan plaid, so that I could discuss Christmas with you. Wow. Next, I
didn't get that. Could you try again?
What? No, girl.
I didn't.
Girl. My watch. I can't even speak. That was a lot of talking. Yeah. Wow. If you're looking for more mosaic inspiration, you can check out one of these 2 videos. Until then, see ya. Ho ho ho, fa la 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 la, deck the halls, all that stuff. Okay, I gotta go. Bye.